Devitta, please tell us
Okay.
about a little bit about yourself and your new position there in the city of Seattle.
Yeah, I first have to say that I really feel that because of my faith, really I'm a God-fearing woman, and I don't believe. I often say I didn't choose this work chose me. And because of my life experiences and my personal and professional experience, I believe that I was appointed to this position to really try to make a big change. As the gun violence prevention liaison, my eyes and my ears are to the community. I know that Mayor Harrell writes my checks, but I feel like um, the community is my boss, and I have to answer to them. So the concerns and the interests of the community is what I work for. I also want to say too that I've taken so many losses. Not just me, but our entire community. Most of the young women that I've grown up with and Black fathers that I know are starting to. First, they were going to prison, but now they're burying their sons and their daughters. And so I really wanted to make an impact, and I'm glad that I'm being appointed to this position. One of the things I want to say too is Mayor Harrell, he not only believes that gun violence prevention is a priority, but he also believes that community engagement with those who are most impacted is what's going to drive better outcomes. And so, being a Black woman that has not only experienced the loss of my son, I buried a partner as well. I also buried my brother to this. And so, I believe what my position allows me to do is to support those community-based efforts that are necessary for preventing gun violence in the first place. So investing in making sure that those community-based organizations have the funding that they need, have the coordinated efforts, and are able to continue to interrupt cycles of violence that we're seeing in our communities.
Right, and I read an op-ed that you had in the Facts newspaper, and you said that you're a member of a real exclusive kind of club that nobody wants to be a member of, and like you said, all the different ways that you're impacted in losing a child, losing a partner, and losing your brother. How is that unique life journey and experience? How do you think that enables you or impacts you in your job and in your service to community?
I think one of the biggest things that even before I was appointed to this position, I talked a lot about how Black women were excluded from the conversation. And I talked a lot about how our leadership there was not inclusion and there wasn't equity. Most of the contracts were being given to most of the Black men. And then you see most of the white-led organizations that are leading the conversation. But Black women who are on both sides of the gun, which I said we have sons that have been murdered, but we also have sons that have murdered. We are on both sides of those guns, but of the gun. But a lot of times, our voices and our experience and our leadership is not being centered. And so, one of the things that I have that I believe is that I'm not. I also talked about in the Facts newspaper. They actually omitted like 9 paragraphs in my op-ed, but I talked a lot about centering those who are most impacted and allowing their leadership to lead us. And that if we want real sustainable efforts, we have to include them. We can't neglect them. I want to take the community along, not have all the answers. This is a complicated issue. There's no one size fits all solution to gun violence.
Right. Well, I have the whole printout, so I read the whole thing. I think that it's interesting and point that you bring up right there, that what we've heard over the last few years, and whether it's manifested itself here on screen or manifested itself in just conversations people have had behind the scenes with me and Trey Holiday, was that there was a lot of women who did feel one way or another that their voice wasn't heard. They weren't sit there at the table. And I mean, I remember one of the things we were talking about last year when a lot of this stuff was being put together, or 2020, whenever it was, is I'm always like, have you talked to those impacted? Because this issue, and it needs to be, there's lots of advocacy, right? Mm-hmm. And there's lots of activism, and they should also be there. And then there's also lobbies. But have you talked to those most impacted? Mm-hmm. And a lot of times it's that victim and the victim's family, or even the perpetrator's family, they're not in those conversations. So I'm glad to hear that that's something that's being uplifted. And from the mayor's office, the last mayor, Mayor Durkin, And Mayor Dirk, in her last interview here, when she was on her way out, she said that one of the regrets is that her office wasn't more vocal and more in reaching out and everything else. And she had started some reach out before she left office, right? She was talking to people and everything else. But how important do you think it is that from the mayor to the city council and electeds in general, that everybody is on some kind of same page here?
Yeah, one of the things I also talked about in my op-ed is that how we have to get past the polarized us versus them politics. This is, and really get out of the politics in general and really pursue community-based and enforcement-based solutions that where we're not fighting and competing against one another. Thomas App, in his book Bleeding Out, he said that urban violence is not an argument to be won, it's a solution to be solved. And so I think that in order for us to all get on the same page, it takes us pushing past those us versus them, fear mongering and racist blame shifting on one side, and then the other side saying we're not gonna involve ourselves with law enforcement at all. And so I think that is one of the things, is that Mayor Harrell really feels that gun violence prevention is a priority. The fact that he created a cabinet level position and saying that I'm going to put all of my resources into trying to disrupt what we're seeing, and a lot of the communities that have been ignored and deprioritized for so long, they have really, what I said in my op-ed is that they have been fighting not just for year after year, but decades on their own to figure this out on their own. And so now I think uplifting those communities that have been most impacted but have been deprioritized and ignored. If you see most of the gun violence conversation around the country, who gets invited to the White House is when there's a mass shooting or when there's a school shooting. But we know that Black and brown young men of color are the ones who are dying the most from this epidemic. And so really centering them and saying that they are victims of a social condition, of problems that they didn't even create.
Right. One of the issues as well, because we're seeing gun violence all across the city.
Yeah.
I mean, we're from D3, but then also, D2, even downtown. We got a clip right here. Actually, it was in the early on, Salman. He said what? Nah, it says downtown murder, unfortunately. Yes.
I can't watch that.
So just to be clear, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
It's disturbing. People see that, like, Jake wasn't dispatched. Like, we don't have enough people to dispatch reporters every time there is a shooting. But this is he caught that because this is a way that we walk every day in this city. We walk through downtown. There's always a lot of stuff right over here, Occidental Park, and this is what we're encountering. And so he's really just sharing, like, this is what I've walked into here today. And I know that you're new on the job and the position is new. So don't worry, we're not going to put you in the headlock on all the solutions. We're going to give you a few months and then come back with a detailed plan.
Yes.
But maybe you can share with us, from a broad view, what are some of the things that you're looking at doing in gun violence disruption?
One of the things, again, is this is a there's no one size fits all solution, but definitely supporting the community-based organizations that are already leading that effort. He also wants to ensure that SPD has the staffing levels that they need to respond to quick responses to public safety emergencies and thorough investigations. We're also looking at aligning the city efforts with the Regional Peacekeepers Collective. So we're doing a lot of work with them. He's also put me on a special assignment for school safety for young people who are being robbed at gunpoint. And so we're uplifting and building power with our community-based organizations to provide safety services in and out of school for our schools. And then also at the legislative level, he wants to look at some new policies that we can pursue around firearms, and so that we could, because I think the biggest thing is the proliferation of weapons on our street, that the accessibility of weapons, and that our local jurisdiction, we don't have any authority or any power to come up with any policies around how can we eliminate the use of firearms in parks and things like that. So those are some of the things that he's looking at. But I was thinking about how gun sales went up during the pandemic, 70%. You're at home. What do you need a gun for? So the gun shops were open, but the libraries were closed. So just if you think about it, the accessibility of weapons is one of the biggest issues that we face right now.
Right. And before I let you go here, I know one of the things, and how we cross paths this time, we're always crossing paths, but this time is around this Beloved campaign. The Beloved campaign, where we've been talking about here for the last, for the last few weeks, of really using an approach of art and history to disrupt gun violence. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about how you became involved in that, and what maybe you personally or the city is doing.
Yeah, well, I've wrote an op-ed for the Beloved campaign. We're also aligning some of our efforts of what they're doing, bringing in all these artists to, number one, talk about what the problem is, the history, and to talk about what the solutions are. And so I also think it's very powerful that they are uplifting like what this beloved community could look like, if we are all able to approach it as a public health issue, all hands on deck, to being able to stop these cycles of violence. This is a preventable issue. This is something we can do something about. Urban gun violence is solvable. And so that's what this campaign is uplifting, is that it's solvable. These deaths do not have to occur, but we need an all hands on deck approach, and everybody supporting these efforts. And it's also uplifting the communities, again, who have been deprioritized and ignored for so long. The young Black and brown men who we are seeing who are dying so rapidly are nameless and faceless. And this is putting a name and a face to those victims and to those families that have suffered for so long. And so I think that's the most powerful thing, is that it's uplifting those communities that have just been erased regarding this issue.
All right. Devitta, man, thank you so much for taking the time. And maybe like I said, we're gonna have to connect on something else but gun violence, but keep it in that track. And maybe like a few months, you come back after you got a few more months on the job, and we can talk more specifically about things as well, because we want, this is important to us here at Converge. I know. This is something we've been talking about for years and years. And so we're here to uplift the messaging and do whatever that we can do in community. Yes. And so I want to say thank you for joining us this morning.
You're welcome. Thank you.